Under the silvery glow of a full moon, Blackthorn Manor's grand conservatory hides a deadly secret. When the rare Luna Seraphica orchid blooms at midnight, a scream shatters. The night doctor Lionel Vance lies dead, a jeweled dagger in his chest. In a locked room where no one could escape, Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of lies, hidden documents, and buried scandals among the elegant guests, each with a motive, each with a secret. As the moonlit truth blooms, only one question remains. Who struck in the shadows? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie-style mystery of betrayal, greed, and murder. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late afternoon sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a warm glow across the polished mahogany desk where he sat, his small, precise hands adjusting the symmetry of his pen and inkstand. The air carried the faint scent of lavender polish, a testament to the meticulous care of his housekeeper, Mrs. Tadworth. Poirot's eyes, sharp and green as a cat's, surveyed a letter that lay open before him, its creamy paper embossed with the crest of Blackthorn Manor, stylized thorn entwined with a crescent moon. The invitation, penned in an elegant hand, bore the signature of Sir Reginald Ashford, a retired diplomat whose reputation for hosting grand gatherings was matched only by his passion for rare orchids. Poirot's lips curved slightly, his waxed mustache twitching as he read the words again. Savouring their promise of intrigue, the invitation requested his presence at Blackthorn Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the misty hills of Devon, for a weekend gathering to celebrate the unveiling of a botanical marvel, the Luna Seraphica, an orchid said to bloom only under the full moon's light. Sir Reginald, with characteristic flourish, described the flower as a jewel of nature, shrouded in mystery, and hinted at its storied past, whispered to involve secrets of far-flung empires. The guest list promised a coterie of fascinating figures, intellectuals, aristocrats, and perhaps, Poirot mused, a rogue or two. His little grey cells, as he liked to call them, hummed with anticipation. A weekend in the country, surrounded by beauty and ambition, was precisely the sort of stage where human nature revealed its hidden facets. Poirot rose, smoothing his immaculate suit, and crossed to the window. The London street below bustled, with the usual cahoskabies shouting, vendors hawking their wares, but his mind was already in Devon, picturing the glass-domed conservatory where the orchid awaited. He had heard of Blackthorn Manor, its Gothic arches and sprawling gardens, a relic of old wealth and of Sir Reginald's obsession with exotic flora. The diplomat's career had taken him to distant corners of the world. Constantinople, Bombay, Peking, where he amassed a collection of plants rivaled only by Kew Gardens. But this Luna Seraphica, Poirot suspected, was more than a botanical curiosity. The letter's tone, though cordial, carried an undercurrent of urgency, as if Sir Reginald feared more than the failure of a flower to bloom. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Intrez," Poirot called, his voice crisp with authority. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional confidant, strode in, his ruddy cheeks flushed from the autumn chill. Hastings, ever the Englishman, wore a tweed jacket and a slightly rumpled expression, as if perpetually surprised by life's complexities. "Poirot, old chap," he said, tossing his hat onto a chair, "you've got that look again. The one that says you're sniffing out a mystery. What's this?" "About a weekend in Devon." Poirot smiled, gesturing to the letter. "Mon ami, you are, as always, perceptive in your own way. Sir Reginald Ashford has invited us to Blackthorn Manor for the unveiling of a most extraordinary orchid, a gathering of minds, a spectacle of nature, and, perhaps, something more. Will you accompany me?" Hastings grinned, his enthusiasm undimmed by years of trailing Poirot through labyrinths of crime. "Orchids. Sounds a bit dull, but I suppose you'll find a murder or two to spice things up." "Count me in." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Hastings' simplicity was a foil to his own precision, but their friendship, forged through countless cases, was unshakable. The journey to Devon began the following morning, the train rattling through a landscape of rolling hills and hedgerows shrouded in mist. Poirot, seated in a first-class carriage, studied his fellow passengers with discreet interest, though none matched the descriptions of the guests listed in Sir Reginald's letter. Hastings, engrossed in a newspaper, muttered about the latest cricket scores, oblivious to the speculative gleam in Poirot's eye. The detective's thoughts drifted to the names he had memorized. Lady Evelyn Ashford, Sir Reginald's wife, known for her elegance and reserve. Dr. Lionel Vance, a botanist whose monographs on tropical flora were renowned. Miss Clara Wentworth, a young heiress with a reputation for sharp wit. Mr. Julian Harrow, an art dealer with a charming smile and questionable ethics. And Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, a widow whose love of gossip rivaled her love of sherry. Each, Poirot suspected, brought their own secrets to Blackthorn Manor. As the train neared its destination, the mist thickened, cloaking the countryside in a ghostly veil. The station at Ashford Cross was a small, windswept platform where a chauffeur awaited with a gleaming Rolls-Royce. The drive to Blackthorn Manor wound through narrow lanes, past ancient oaks and stone walls, until the estate emerged like a vision from a Gothic novel. Its towers and gables loomed against the darkening sky, and the conservatory, a vast dome of glass, caught the last rays of sunlight, glinting like a diamond. Poirot's heart quickened. Such grandeur, he knew, often concealed darker truths. "Sir." Reginald greeted them at the entrance, his silver hair impeccably groomed, his handshake firm but his eyes shadowed with unease. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, a pleasure," he said, his voice rich with the cadence of a seasoned orator. "Welcome to Blackthorn Manor. I trust the journey was pleasant." His smile was warm, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hand. The glance toward the conservatory as if it held a secret he dared not voice. "Most agreeable, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "Your invitation promises a spectacle not to be missed. This lunar seraphic is, I understand, a flower of rare distinction." Sir Reginald's face lit up, though the unease lingered. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, a marvel from the jungles of Siam, said to bloom only under a full moon, its petals are said to hold. Well, legends, you know, superstitions of hidden truths. But come, let me introduce you to the others." The drawing room was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords. The guests, already assembled, turned as Poirot and Hastings entered. Lady Evelyn Ashford, tall and regal in a gown of midnight blue, offered a cool smile, her eyes appraising Poirot with a flicker of curiosity. Dr. Lionel Vance, a wiry man with a scholar's stoop, clutched a notebook, his fingers stained with ink. Miss Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair catching the firelight, lounged with a glass of champagne, her expression one of amused disdain. Julian Harrow, impeccably dressed, exuded charm as he bowed over Poirot's hand, while Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her face powdered and her eyes bright with curiosity, chattered about the weather. Dinner was served in a dining room aglow with candlelight, the table laden with silver and porcelain. The conversation, at first, was light tales of London's season, the latest exhibitions, the quirks of country life. But as the courses progressed, Poirot detected undercurrents of tension. Sir Reginald spoke passionately of the lunar seraphica, describing its discovery in a Siamese temple, its journey through diplomatic channels, and the rumors that its petals concealed a message written in invisible ink, a relic of colonial intrigue. Dr. Vance, his voice sharp, challenged the legend, insisting the flower's value lay in its biology, not myth. Lady Evelyn, silent for much of the meal, stiffened when her husband mentioned the orchid's history, her fork pausing mid-air. Clara Wentworth, with a laugh that cut like glass, remarked, "Really, Sir Reginald? You make it sound as if this flower could ruin us all. What secrets could a plant possibly hold?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes lingered on Vance, who flushed and turned away. Julian Harrow, ever the diplomat, steered the conversation to art, praising a painting above the mantle, a brooding landscape by a forgotten master, Mrs. Beatrice Lyle. Emboldened by her third glass of sherry, leaned toward Poirot and whispered, "They say the orchid's curse brings misfortune to those who seek its secrets. Dr. Vance, I hear, is quite obsessed." Poirot, sipping his wine, observed each guest with the precision of a watchmaker. Sir Reginald's enthusiasm masked a deeper worry. Lady Evelyn's silence suggested knowledge she wished to conceal. Vance's agitation hinted at professional rivalry. Clara's sharpness betrayed calculation. Harrow's charm felt practiced, and Beatrice's gossip veiled a keen observer's mind. Hastings, blissfully unaware of these subtleties, complimented the roast pheasant, earning a grateful smile from the host. As dessert was served, a delicate lemon soufflé, conversation turned to the unveiling, scheduled for midnight the following evening, when the moon would be at its fullest. Sir Reginald described the conservatory's design, its glass panels engineered to capture moonlight, creating a stage for the orchid's bloom. "It is a moment of alchemy," he said, his eyes alight. "Nature and man in perfect harmony." But Poirot, watching Lady Evelyn's fingers tighten around her napkin, sensed discord beneath the harmony. After dinner, the guests retired to the library, where a fire crackled and brandy was poured. Poirot declined a cigar, preferring to study. The room's details, the leather-bound books, the marble bust of a forgotten Ashford, the faint scent of damp earth wafting from the conservatory beyond. He approached Sir Reginald, who stood by a window overlooking the gardens. "This orchid, Sir Reginald," Poirot said softly, "it is more than a flower, n'est-ce pas? There is a story behind your invitation, a reason for this gathering." Sir Reginald's smile faltered. "You are perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. The lunar seraphica is a prize, yes, but its acquisition. Let us say it has stirred old rivalries. Dr. Vance, for one, believes it should be in a museum, not my conservatory. And there are whispers, foolish, perhaps, that its history is tied to certain indiscretions." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And these indiscretions, they involve your guests?" Sir Reginald hesitated, then shook his head. "I trust you, Monsieur Poirot, to see what others miss. But I beg you, let us enjoy the weekend. The orchid will bloom, and all will be well." His voice lacked conviction, and Poirot's little grey cells noted the diplomat's unease as a clue in itself as the evening drew to a close. Poirot and Hastings were shown to their rooms' adjacent suites, overlooking the conservatory. Hastings, yawning, remarked, "Seems a pleasant lot, though that Vance fellow's a bit intense. All this talk of orchids and curses, surely it's just a flower show, Poirot." Poirot, adjusting his silk pajamas, smiled enigmatically. "Mon ami, a flower may be beautiful, but it is the roots, hidden in the dark, that hold the truth. Tomorrow we shall see what blooms at Blackthorn Manor." Sleep came slowly to Poirot, his mind alive with the faces and words of the evening. The lunar Seraphica, he sensed, was a catalyst, drawing out secrets long buried. As the moon rose, casting its silver light across the estate, he felt the familiar thrill of a puzzle unfolding, a puzzle that by the weekend's end would reveal its deadly design. The next morning dawned grey and damp, the mist clinging to the manor like a shroud. Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, joined Hastings for breakfast in a sunlit parlour. The other guests trickled in, each bearing traces of the previous night's tensions. Lady Evelyn, pale but composed, spoke little, her eyes darting to the conservatory's distant dome. Dr. Vance, clutching his notebook, muttered about soil pH and lunar cycles, his obsession palpable. Clara Wentworth, radiant in a green silk dress, teased Hastings about his military anecdotes, her laughter sharp as a blade. Julian Harrow, ever charming, complimented Poirot's tie, while Mrs. Beatrice Lyle regaled the table with tales of a scandalous ball in Bath. Sir Reginald, presiding over the meal, announced a tour of the gardens before lunch, promising a glimpse of the conservatory's lesser treasures. As the group strolled through manicured lawns and rose beds, Poirot lagged behind, observing. Clara walked alone, her expression pensive. Vance hovered near the conservatory, sketching plants. Harrow and Lady Evelyn exchanged quiet words, their faces guarded. Beatrice, trailing Poirot, whispered, "They say Sir Reginald paid a fortune for that orchid, but at what cost? There's talk of debts, Monsieur Poirot, and old grudges." The conservatory, when they reached it, was a marvelous cathedral of glass and iron, its air humid and fragrant with earth and blooms. Orchids of every hue lined the paths, their petals delicate as lace. At the center, on a marble pedestal, stood the lunar Seraphica, its buds tightly furled, awaiting the moon's command. Sir Reginald, with a showman's flair, described its care, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. A faint scratch on the pedestal's base, barely visible, suggested tampering. A single leaf, crushed beneath a bench, hinted at a recent visitor, and the lock on the conservatory door, though sturdy, bore faint marks of tampering, marks only a trained eye would notice. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his fingers brushing the orchid's pot. The soil was freshly turned, as if someone had disturbed it. He glanced at Hastings, who was admiring a fern. "Mon ami Poirot," said softly, "this place, it is not only a garden. It is a stage, and the players, they are preparing for a drama we have yet to understand." By evening, the manor buzzed with anticipation for the unveiling. The guests, dressed for dinner, their finery a contrast to the growing tension. Poirot, in his black tie, observed the subtle shifts. Lady Evelyn's forced smile, Vance's nervous pacing, Clara's barbed remarks. The lunar Seraphica loomed in their thoughts, a silent promise of revelation. As the clock struck 9, Sir Reginald raised a glass, toasting to beauty and discovery. But Poirot, watching the flickering candles, saw only the shadows. They cast shadows that hid a truth waiting to bloom. Chapter 2. The moonlit unveiling. The night air was cool and fragrant, as it drifted through Blackthorn Manor, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens beyond. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his evening attire, adjusted his cufflinks and surveyed the drawing room where the guests had gathered after dinner. The chandeliers cast a golden glow, illuminating faces that bore traces of excitement, unease, and, in some cases, barely concealed hostility. The hour of the lunar Seraphica's unveiling approached, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. As if the very walls of the manor sensed the weight of the moment, Sir Reginald Ashford, resplendent in a tailored dinner jacket, stood by the fireplace, his silver hair catching the light as he regaled the group with tales of the orchid's origins. His voice, rich and commanding, wove a story of a Siamese temple hidden in the jungle, where priests guarded the flower as a sacred relic. They say, he concluded, his eyes gleaming, that the lunar Seraphica blooms only when the moon is full, its petals revealing secrets to those who dare to look. His words hung in the air, met with murmurs of intrigue and, from Dr. Lionel Vance, a derisive snort. Vance, his wiry frame taut with impatience, clutched a glass of brandy. "Superstition, Sir Reginald," he said, his voice sharp as a scalpel. "The flower's biology is remarkable, yes, but this talk of secrets is nonsense. Its value lies in its rarity, not some mystical claptrap." His dark eyes darted to the conservatory doors, visible through the arched windows, as if willing the moment to arrive. Lady Evelyn Ashford, seated on a velvet chaise, offered a faint smile, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her sapphire gown shimmered, but her composure seemed fragile, like porcelain on the verge of cracking. "Dr. Vance," she said softly, "some mysteries are more than science can explain." Her tone was polite, but Poirot noted the edge beneath it, a hint of defiance that piqued his curiosity. Miss Clara Wentworth, lounging with a cigarette in a silver holder, laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Evelyn, you sound positively Gothic. Next, you'll tell us the orchid is cursed." Her auburn hair glowed in the candlelight, and her green eyes sparkled with mischief, though Poirot detected a calculating glint as she glanced at Van Start. Mr. Julian Harrow, ever the charmer, leaned forward, his smile disarming. "Cursed or not, I'd wager that flower's worth a fortune. Beauty always has a price, doesn't it?" His words were light, but his gaze lingered on Clara, who met it with a raised eyebrow. Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her cheeks flushed from sherry, leaned toward Captain Hastings, who sat beside her, looking slightly overwhelmed by the rapid-fire conversation. "They say," she whispered loudly, "that the orchid's petals hide a message written in the sap of the plant itself. Imagine what secrets it might hold, scandals, perhaps, or even treason." Hastings, ever polite, nodded, though his eyes sought Poirot for rescue. Poirot, standing near a bookcase, sipped his tisane, his keen eyes missing nothing. The guests' interactions were a tapestry of motives, each thread a potential clue. Sir Reginald's enthusiasm for the orchid bordered on obsession. Lady Evelyn's reserve suggested knowledge she wished to conceal. Vance's scorn masked a deeper fixation. Clara's wit was a shield for something sharper. Harrow's charm felt too polished, and Beatrice's gossip, though tiresome, might yet prove useful. The little grey cells, as Poirot called his remarkable intellect, were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of Blackthorn Manor at 11:30. Sir Reginald clapped his hands, his face alight with anticipation. "My friends, the hour approaches. The moon is nearly at its zenith. Shall we proceed to the conservatory?" The guests rose, their chatter fading into a hushed expectancy as they followed their host through the manor's corridors. Poirot, walking beside Hastings, noted the way the group moved, striding ahead, Clara lingering near the rear, Lady Evelyn clutching her husband's arm with a grip that seemed more anxious than affectionate. The conservatory was a marvel of glass and iron, its dome soaring above a jungle of exotic plants. Palms and ferns arched overhead, their fronds casting intricate shadows in the moonlight that streamed through the transparent panels. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and blooms, a humid embrace that made Hastings loosen his collar. At the center of the space, on a marble pedestal, stood the lunar seraphica, its buds still tightly furled, their pale green tips tinged with silver. A single spotlight, cunningly hidden among the foliage, bathed the flower in a soft glow, heightening the sense of a stage set for a grand performance. Sir Reginald positioned himself beside the pedestal, his hands clasped as if in prayer. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant, "we are about to witness a miracle of nature. The lunar seraphica, nurtured with care, will open its petals under the moon's full light. Watch closely, for this moment is fleeting." The guests formed a loose semicircle, their faces illuminated by the silver radiance. Poirot, standing slightly apart, observed their expressions. Sir Reginald's fervor, Lady Evelyn's tension, Vance's skepticism, Clara's amusement, Harry's curiosity, and Beatrice's wide-eyed awe. As the clock in the manor chimed midnight, a hush fell over the group. The moonlight intensified, pouring through the dome like liquid silver, and the orchid's buds began to tremble. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the petals unfurled, revealing a heart of luminous white, veined with delicate gold. A collective gasp rose from the guests, and even Poirot, ever composed, felt a thrill at the sight. The flower was indeed a marvel, its beauty otherworldly, as if it belonged to a realm beyond the mortal. But the moment of wonder was shattered by a piercing scream. Lady Evelyn staggered back, her hand pointing to the shadows near a cluster of ferns. "There," she cried, her voice trembling. "Oh God, there!" All eyes followed her gesture, and a collective gasp turned to horror. Slumped against the ferns, his body half hidden by their fronds, was Dr. Lionel Vance, his eyes wide in a frozen stare, a jeweled dagger protruding from his chest. Blood stained his white shirt front, a stark contrast to the pale moonlight. The lunar seraphica, its petals now fully open, seemed to glow with an eerie indifference, as if mocking the tragedy at its feet. Chaos erupted. Beatrice Lyle clutched Hastings' arm, sobbing hysterically. Clara Wentworth froze, her cigarette falling to the ground. Julian Harrow stepped forward, then hesitated, his face pale. Sir Reginald, his hands shaking, stammered, This is impossible." Lady Evelyn, trembling, sank onto a bench, her eyes fixed on the body. Poirot, his calm a beacon in the storm, raised a hand. "Mies, Amos, remain where you are. Do not touch anything. This is now a matter for investigation." Hastings, ever loyal, moved to Poirot's side, his military instincts kicking in. "Good Lord, Poirot, he's dead. Stabbed, right here, in front of us all." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed shock. Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the scene. The conservatory, he noted, had only one entrance, a heavy glass door that Sir Reginald had locked upon their arrival. The key, still in Sir Reginald's pocket, gleamed as he produced it at Poirot's request. The windows, high and narrow, were sealed, their latches rusted from disuse. The murder, it seemed, had occurred in a locked room, a puzzle that intrigued Poirot's methodical mind. Kneeling beside the body, Poirot examined Vance with care, his gloved hands avoiding the blood. The dagger was ornate, its handle encrusted with emeralds, its craftsmanship suggesting origins in the East, perhaps from Sir Reginald's diplomatic travels. The blade was buried deep, indicating a strong, deliberate thrust. Vance's notebook, fallen beside him, was open to a page of hurried sketches, diagrams of the lunar Seraphica, annotated with cryptic symbols. Poirot slipped the notebook into his pocket, his expression unreadable. "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, rising, "this door was locked. We, and you alone, held the key." The diplomat nodded, his face ashen. "Then we are faced with a mystery," Poirot continued. "A man is dead, in a room sealed from within, surrounded by all of you. Yet none, it seems, saw the act. This is most curious." Clara Wentworth, recovering her composure, stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Are you suggesting one of us did this? That's absurd. We were all watching the orchid." Her eyes, however, avoided the body, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hand. "Absurd, perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone mild, but his eyes piercing. "But the truth, mademoiselle, does not bend to our assumptions. I shall require statements from each of you. Captain Hastings, please ensure no one leaves this conservatory until I have examined the scene." As Hastings moved to guard the door, Poirot's gaze returned to the lunar Seraphica. Its petals, radiant in the moonlight, seemed to pulse with a secret of their own. He stepped closer, noting a faint smear of pollen on the pedestal's edge, a detail overlooked by the others. The little grey cells were at work, weaving a pattern from the chaos. A murder had been committed under the moon's unblinking gaze, and Poirot knew that the truth, like the orchid, would soon bloom. A killer hidden among the shadows. Chapter 3. The Suspects and Their Secrets. The Conservatory. Moments ago, a stage 4 botanical wonder, now lay under a pall of dread, its glass walls reflecting the moonlight in cold, unyielding shards. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the scene, his small, precise figure, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted with Dr. Lionel Vance's murder. The lunar Seraphica, its petals, still aglow, seemed to mock the tragedy, its beauty untouched by the blood staining the ferns nearby. The guests, huddled in a tense knot, whispered among themselves, their faces pale, their eyes darting between the body and Poirot's calm, assessing gaze. Captain Hastings, stationed at the conservatory's locked door, looked to Poirot for guidance, his military bearing strained by the shock of the crime. "This is a grim business, Poirot," he murmured, his voice low. "Stabbed in a locked room, with all of us here. How could it happen?" Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, offered a slight nod, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a mind already unraveling the puzzle. "Patience, mon ami Poirot," replied softly. "The impossible is merely the possible in disguise. We shall begin with order and method." He turned to the group, his voice cutting through their murmurs like a blade. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed, and none shall leave until I have your accounts. We will adjourn to the drawing room, where we may speak with clarity. Sir Reginald, the key, if you please, remains with me." Sir Reginald Ashford, his face ashen, handed over the key with trembling fingers. "Monsieur Poirot, this is unthinkable. Vance was a colleague, a guest under my roof." His voice faltered, but Poirot noted the flicker of something unspoken. In his eyes, fear perhaps, or guilt. The group filed out, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor, leaving the conservatory to its silent vigil over the dead. Poirot, lingering a moment, cast a final glance at Vance's body, the jeweled dagger still protruding from his chest. The weapon's exotic design, its emeralds catching the moonlight, suggested a history far removed from this Devon estate. A clue, Poirot thought, but one that required context. He followed the others, his mind already cataloguing their behaviors. In the drawing room, the fire had dwindled to embers, casting long shadows across the opulent furnishings. The guests settled uneasily. Lady Evelyn Ashford on a hubback chair, her posture rigid. Clara Wentworth pacing near a window, her cigarette case forgotten. Julian Harrow leaning against a bookcase, his charm subdued. And Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes wide with morbid fascination. Sir Reginald stood by the mantel, his hands clasped as if to steady himself. Hastings, ever dutiful, took a notebook from his pocket, ready to record Poirot's inquiries. Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. Let us establish the facts. At midnight, the Luna Seraphica began to bloom. All of you were present in the conservatory. I require each of you to state your position and observations at that moment. We begin with you, Sir Reginald. Sir. Reginald cleared his throat, his diplomatic poise fraying. I was at the pedestal, addressing the guests. My attention was on the orchid, naturally. I saw nothing untoward until Evelyn screamed. His eyes flicked to his wife, who sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, noting the tightness of her lips. And you, madame, where were you when the tragedy occurred? Lady Evelyn's voice was low, almost a whisper. I stood beside my husband, near the pedestal. I was watching the orchid, as we all were. When the petals opened, I glanced toward the ferns. Something caught my eye, a shadow perhaps. Then I saw him. Her hand fluttered to her throat, and Poirot observed the tremor, wondering if it stemmed from shock or something deeper. Miss Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair catching the firelight, spoke next, her tone defiant. I was near the ferns, a few paces from the pedestal. I was watching the orchid, like everyone else. I didn't see Vance until Evelyn screamed. Honestly, Monsieur Poirot, this is ridiculous. We were all there, staring at that wretched flower. Her eyes, however, avoided Poirot's, and he noted the slight clench of her jaw. Julian Harrow stepped forward, his voice smooth but subdued. I was by the glass wall, to the right of the pedestal. I had a clear view of the orchid and most of the room. I saw nothing unusual until the scream. Poor Vance can't imagine who would do such a thing. His smile was faint, but Poirot detected a guarded quality, as if Harrow were measuring his words. Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her handkerchief twisted into knots, spoke in a rush. I was near the entrance, Monsieur Poirot, close to the door. I was watching the orchid, but I did glance at the others. One does, you know, at such gatherings. I thought I heard a rustle like fabric, just before the scream, but I couldn't say from where. Her eyes darted to Clara, then away, and Poirot filed the observation away. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind him. Bon, we have a picture, incomplete but useful. A man is dead, stabbed with a dagger of unusual design, in a locked conservatory where all were present. Yet none saw the act. This is a paradox, none. Let us now consider motives. Dr. Vance was a man of strong opinions, a botanist of renown. Did he have enemies among you? A heavy silence fell. Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably. Vance and I, we had our differences. He believed the Luna Seraphica should be in a public collection, not my private one. He was vocal about it, perhaps too much so, but murder, surely not. His voice lacked conviction, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Lady, Evelyn spoke, her voice steady now. Dr. Vance was inquisitive. He asked questions about my family, my late brother in particular. It was intrusive, but I dismissed it as scholarly curiosity. Her fingers tightened on her chair, and Poirot noted the mention of her brother, a diplomat whose death years ago had been shrouded in whispers. Clara Wentworth laughed sharply. Vance was insufferable, always poking into other people's affairs. He called me a dilettante once, said my inheritance was wasted on frivolity. I told him to mind his own business. Her defiance was bold, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease in her posture. Julian Harrow shrugged, his tone light. I barely knew the man, but we had a disagreement once, over an art deal. He thought I'd overvalued a painting. A trifling matter, really. His casualness felt rehearsed, and Poirot's little grey cells stirred. Beatrice Lyle leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. I overheard Vance arguing with someone, I couldn't see who, in the garden yesterday. He said something about exposing a truth, something that would ruin reputations. I thought it was just his usual bluster, but now... She trailed off, her eyes wide with implication. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Merci, Madame Lyle. Your ears, they are most attentive. He turned to the group, his voice firm. Each of you, it seems, had reason to resent Dr. Vance. Professional rivalry, personal affronts, threats of exposure. These are the threads of motive. But motive alone does not make a murderer. We must find the opportunity, the means. The dagger, it is not familiar to any of you. A chorus of denials followed, though Poirot noted the quick glances exchanged between Sir Reginald and Lady Evelyn. The dagger, with its emerald-encrusted handle, was no ordinary weapon. Its presence suggested premeditation, a connection to the past, perhaps to Sir Reginald's diplomatic travels, or to the orchid's own mysterious history. Poirot dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in the manor. As they dispersed, he drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, observe the subtleties. Each tells a truth, but each hides more. The key to this murder lies not only in the conservatory, but in the hearts of those who stood there. We must dig deeper. Hastings, his brow furrowed, nodded. It's a devil of a puzzle, Poirot. A locked room, a dagger from nowhere, and all of them claiming innocence. Where do we start? Poirot's moustache twitched. We start, Hastings, with the truth that hides in plain sight. The Luna Seraphica is more than a flower. It is a mirror reflecting the secrets of those who seek it. Come, we return to the conservatory. The scene of the crime, it speaks to those who listen. As they left the drawing room, the moonlight cast long shadows across the manor, and Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The suspects and their secrets formed a web, intricate and deadly, and he knew that untangling it would require all the precision of his little grey cells. Chapter 4. The Conservatories. Clues. The conservatory at Blackthorn Manor, bathed in the pale glow of dawn, stood silent, its glass dome refracting the first light into prismatic flecks across the lush foliage. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the morning chill, stepped carefully over the stone path, his eyes scanning the scene where Dr. Lionel Vance had met his end mere hours before. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and exotic blooms, a heady contrast to the grim task at hand. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his face drawn, his usual vigor subdued by the weight of the crime. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings said, his voice low, "this place gives me the creeps now. All that beauty, and yet, a man's dead. How do you stay so calm?" He glanced at the spot where Vance's body had lain, now marked only by a faint stain on the soil, the body having been removed by the local constable under Poirot's supervision. Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes sharp as he surveyed the conservatory. "Calm, mon ami, is the product of method. The heart may recoil, but the mind, it must remain clear. This conservatory, it is a stage, and the clues it holds are the lines of our drama. We must read them with care." The Luna Seraphica still stood on its marble pedestal, its petals now closed in the absence of moonlight, their luminous white dulled to a ghostly pallor. Poirot approached the flower, his gloved hands hovering over the pot. The soil, he noted, was disturbed, not merely from the natural settling of a plant, but in a way that suggested deliberate tampering. A faint ridge of earth circled the base, as if someone had pressed it down hastily. He knelt, his magnifying glass catching the light as he examined the surface. A single grain of pollen, golden and distinct, clung to the pedestal's edge, its presence an anomaly in the otherwise pristine setting. "Curious," Poirot murmured, producing a small envelope from his pocket and carefully collecting the pollen. "This pollen, it is not from the Luna Seraphica. Its hue is wrong to vibrant. Another plant, perhaps, or a deliberate planting of evidence." He glanced at Hastings, who looked puzzled but nodded. Trusting Poirot's instincts, Poirot's gaze shifted to the ferns where Vance had been found. The fronds, still bent from the weight of the body, bore traces of disturbance. Broken stem here, a crushed leaf there. Among the foliage, caught on a thorn, was a scrap of silk, pale blue and shimmering, no larger than a postage stamp. Poirot plucked it free, holding it to the light. "This silk, it is fine, expensive, yet none of our guests wore such a shade last night. A clue, Hastings, or a distraction?" Hastings frowned, peering at the fabric. Could it be from a shawl or a scarf? Someone might have dropped it earlier, not during the murder. His tone was hopeful, but Poirot's expression remained skeptical. "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the silk into another envelope. "But in a murder, every detail is a thread in the tapestry. We must weave them together." He moved to the spot where Vance had fallen, the soil beneath still soft from the constable's careful removal of the body. Footprints, faint but discernible, marked the earth descents, one larger, one smaller, overlapping in a chaotic pattern that suggested a struggle. The larger prints, Poirot noted, matched the boots Vance had worn, their deep tread consistent with a man of his build. The smaller set, however, was narrower, with a delicate heel, hinting at a woman's sure, a man with unusually small feet. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the prints. "A struggle, yes, but brief. The dagger struck with precision, yet these prints suggest movement before the fatal blow." Vance was not surprised from behind. He faced his killer. He straightened, his mind racing. The locked door, the key in Sir Reginald's possession. The absence of other exits, these facts formed a puzzle that defied logic. Yet Poirot thrived on such challenges. He turned his attention to the dagger, now in the constable's custody, but vividly etched in his memory. Its emerald-encrusted handle, its curved blade, spoke of distant lands, perhaps Persia or India, a relic from Sir Reginald's diplomatic days. Poirot had noted its weight, its balance, suggesting a weapon designed for ceremony yet capable of deadly precision. Its presence in the conservatory was no accident. It had been brought there, hidden, waiting for its moment. But by whom? Hastings, rubbing his chin, ventured a theory. What about a hidden passage, Poirot? These old houses are full of them, secret doors, that sort of thing. The killer could have slipped in and out. His eyes brightened at the thought, but Poirot shook his head. Nan, mon ami, I have examined the walls, the floor. The conservatory is a fortress of glass and iron. Its only entrance, the door, we know, was locked. The solution lies not in hidden passages, but in the actions of those present. He paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the stone path. Consider the timing. The orchid began to bloom at midnight. All eyes were on it, yet Vance was stabbed in those fleeting moments. The killer, they were bold or desperate to act in such a crowd. Poirot's gaze returned to the Luna Seraphica. The pot, he noted, was slightly askew, its base not flush. With the pedestal, he tilted it gently, revealing a faint scratch in the marble beneath, as if something had been dragged across it. This pot, he said, it has been moved, perhaps recently. And see here, he pointed to a smear of pollen on Vance's sleeve, preserved in the constable's photographs. This pollen, it matches that on the pedestal. Vance touched the orchid, or it touched him, before he died. Hastings' eyes widened. You think the orchid's involved, but how? It's just a plant. His practical mind struggled with the notion. But Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not involved Hastings, but a witness. The Luna Seraphica drew all eyes, creating the perfect distraction. The killer used this moment, this spectacle, to strike. Poirot's fingers brushed the pot's rim, his mind conjuring the scene. The guests mesmerized, the moonlight flooding the dome, a shadow moving swiftly among the ferns. He stepped back, surveying the conservatory's layout. The ferns formed, a natural screen, partially obscuring Vance's position from the main group. The pedestal stood central, commanding attention, while the glass walls offered no cover for an outsider. The killer, Poirot concluded, had been among them, blending into the crowd, their movements masked by the collective focus on the orchid. But the dagger, its origin, remained a mystery, a key to unlocking the killer's identity. As they left the conservatory, Poirot paused at the door, examining the lock once more. The faint scratches he had noticed earlier were clearer in the daylight, suggesting a tool had been used, not to pick the lock, but perhaps to test it. This door, he said to Hastings, it was locked, yes, but locks can be deceptive. We must learn more of this dagger, its history, its owner. Back in the manor, the guests were gathered in the morning room, their faces drawn from a sleepless night. Sir Reginald, his eyes shadowed, offered coffee, his hands unsteady. Lady Evelyn sat apart, her gaze distant, while Clara Wentworth lit another cigarette, her movements sharp. Julian Harrow, attempting levity, complimented the breakfast spread, but his charm fell flat. Beatrice Lyle, her handkerchief now a sodden lump, whispered to anyone who would listen, her theories growing wilder with each retelling. Poirot, declining coffee, addressed the group. Madame et Messieurs, the conservatory has spoken, and its clues are many. A scrap of silk, footprints in the soil, a pot disturbed. These are the threads of our mystery. I ask again, the dagger, with its emeralds and Eastern design, does it stir any memory? Silence met his question. though Poirot noted the quick glance between Sir Reginald and Lady Evelyn, the slight stiffening of Clara's posture. Beatrice. Lyle ventured, "It looked like something from a museum, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps from Sir Reginald's travels." Her tone was innocent, but her eyes gleamed with speculation. Sir Reginald cleared his throat. I have collected many artifacts, it's true. But that dagger, I don't recall it. My collection is vast, you understand." His voice was strained, and Poirot's little grey cells noted the evasion. Lady Evelyn added, her voice soft, "Such things were common in my husband's postings abroad. Gifts from dignitaries, you know. But I've never seen that dagger before." Her fingers twisted a ring on her hand. A nervous gesture, Poirot filed away. As the group dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The conservatory, it is a treasure trove of clues, but the true secrets lie in the hearts of our suspects. The dagger, the silk, the pollen, they point to a plan, a purpose. We must learn more of Vance's last hours, his enemies, his discoveries." Hastings nodded, his face grim. "It's a devilish puzzle, Poirot. But you'll crack it, I know." "Where to next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "To the staff, mon ami. The servants, they see what the guests do not. And then, perhaps, to the orchid itself. It holds a secret, I am certain, and we shall uncover it before the moon rises again." As they left the morning room, the conservatory's glass dome caught the rising sun, its light a silent witness to the clues within. Poirot's mind, sharp and relentless, wove the fragments together, sensing that the truth, like the lunar awaited only the right moment to bloom. Chapter 5. Tensions at dawn. The dawn light crept over Blackthorn Manor, its pale rays piercing the mist that clung to the Devon hills like a mourner's veil. Within the manor, the air was thick with unease, the grandeur of its halls dimmed by the shadow of Dr. Lionel Vance's murder. Hercule Poirot, immaculate despite the sleepless night, stood in the morning room, his green eyes scanning the faces of the guests who had gathered for a subdued breakfast. The clink of porcelain and the murmur of strained pleasantries did little to mask the tension that hung over the table, as palpable as the damp chill seeping through the windows. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, pushed his untouched plate of kedgeree aside, his face etched with concern. "This is a grim morning, Poirot," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the scrape of cutlery. "They're all on edge, and who can blame them? A murderer among us, and that locked conservatory. It's like a ghost story gone wrong." His eyes darted to the guests, each absorbed in their own thoughts, their civility a thin veneer over suspicion. Poirot, sipping a cup of steaming tisane, nodded slightly, his moustache perfectly symmetrical despite the hour. "The human heart, mon ami, is a storm in a teacup calm on the surface, but churning beneath. This morning we shall stir the waters and see what rises." His gaze moved from one guest to another, cataloguing their behaviors with the precision of a watchmaker assembling a delicate mechanism. Sir Reginald Ashford, at the head of the table, presided with a diplomat's forced composure, though his hands trembled as he poured coffee. Lady Evelyn, beside him, sat with an elegance that bordered on rigidity, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if avoiding the weight of the room. Miss Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair pinned carelessly, lit a cigarette with a defiant flick, her sharp gaze challenging anyone who met it. Julian Harrow, ever the polished art dealer, attempted to lighten the mood with a comment on the morning's beauty, but his smile faltered under the group's silence. Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her face pale beneath its powder, clutched a teacup, her eyes darting nervously, as if expecting the killer to strike again. Poirot's first task was to question the staff, those silent observers who moved through the manor's shadows. He excused himself from the table, gesturing for Hastings to follow, and made his way to the servants' quarters, a labyrinth of narrow corridors below stairs. The housekeeper, Mrs. Granger, a stout woman with a nonsense air, met them in the pantry, her apron crisp despite the early hour. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but her eyes wary. "This is a terrible business. Dr. Vance was a guest, but not a kind one, always demanding, always poking about where he wasn't wanted." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where, Madame Granger, did he poke?" His tone was gentle, but his question carried the weight of authority. Mrs. Granger hesitated, then spoke. "The gardens, sir, and the conservatory, mostly. He'd spend hours there, taking samples, scribbling. In that notebook of his. Yesterday, I saw him arguing with Miss Wentworth near the rose beds. Sharp words, they were, though I couldn't hear the details. She looked furious, and he, well, he had that smug look he always wore." Poirot nodded, filing the information. "Away, and the other guests? Did Dr. Vance clash with them as well?" The housekeeper pursed her lips. "He was difficult. Asked Lady Evelyn odd questions about her family, her brother especially. She didn't like it, I could tell. And Mr. Harrow, he and the doctor had words once. Something about a painting. I don't know more, sir, but the staff, we notice things." Poirot thanked her, then sought out Elsie, the young maid who cleaned the guest rooms. Elsie, nervous but eager to help, revealed a discovery that quickened Poirot's pulse. "I found a note, sir, in Dr. Vance's room when I tidied it yesterday. It was tucked under his blotter, and I only saw it by chance. It said, 'The truth blooms at midnight.' I didn't think much of it. He was always writing odd things, but now—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes wide with fear. Poirot's little grey cells hummed. "This note, Elsie, it is most important. Can you describe it?" "It was on his own stationery, sir, in his handwriting. Black ink, scrawled, like he was in a hurry. I left it where it was. Didn't think it right to touch it." Elsie's hands twisted in her apron, and Poirot dismissed her gently, his mind racing. The note's cryptic message, "The truth blooms at midnight," echoed Sir Reginald's tales of the lunar Seraphica's secrets. Was it a reference to the orchid's unveiling, or something more sinister? Returning to the morning room, Poirot found the guests still at breakfast, though the food remained largely untouched. He addressed them with his characteristic calm. "Madame et messieurs, I have learned of a note found in Dr. Vance's room, bearing the words, 'The truth blooms at midnight.' Does this phrase stir any memories?" A ripple of unease passed through the group. Sir Reginald's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "A note," he said, his voice strained. "I know nothing of it. Vance was always scribbling, botanical nonsense no doubt. But his eyes avoided Poirot's, and the detective noted the diplomat's discomfort. Lady Evelyn's face paled, her fingers tightening on her napkin. Midnight, that was when the orchid bloomed. Perhaps he meant the flower itself. Her suggestion was plausible, but Poirot detected a tremor in her voice, as if the note held a personal significance. Clara Wentworth exhaled a plume of smoke, her expression defiant. Vance was always playing at being mysterious. Probably thought. It made him sound clever. "It's nothing, Monsieur Poirot." Her dismissal was too quick, and Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the faint flush on her cheeks, Julian Harrow leaned back, his tone casual. Sounds like something out of a melodrama. Vance did love his theatrics. Perhaps he was planning a prank. His smile was disarming, but Poirot sensed calculation behind it. Beatrice Lyle, unable to resist, leaned forward. A secret message. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, it must mean something. Vance was always hinting at scandals. Perhaps he knew something dangerous. Her excitement bordered on glee, and Poirot suppressed a sigh. Her penchant for gossip was tiresome, but her observations might yet prove valuable. As the group dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, leading him to a quiet corner of the library. The room, lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy drapes, offered a respite from the morning's tensions. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind him. This note, Hastings, it is a key. The truth blooms at midnight. It suggests Vance anticipated a revelation, perhaps one tied to the lunar Serpifica. But whose truth, and why did it cost him his life? Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the puzzle. Could it be blackmail? Vance seemed the type to dig up dirt on people. Maybe he pushed someone too far. His suggestion was sound, and Poirot nodded, his thoughts turning to Lady Evelyn's unease at the mention of her brother, a diplomat whose death, years ago, had been cloaked in mystery. Poirot's gaze drifted to a portrait above the mantel. A stern-faced man in diplomatic attire, his features strikingly similar to Lady Evelyn's. Her brother, Poirot, murmured. Vance's questions about him troubled her, and Clara Wentworth's argument with Vance in the garden. What was its nature? We must learn more of these connections. Hastings, ever eager to act, suggested, "Shall I speak to the groundskeeper? He might have seen something in the garden yesterday." Poirot approved, and as Hastings left, the detective approached Lady Evelyn, who lingered by a window, her gaze fixed on the mist-shrouded gardens. "Madame," Poirot said softly, "Dr. Vance's inquiries about your brother, they distressed you. May I know why?" His tone was gentle, but his eyes were piercing. Lady Evelyn's lips tightened, her fingers twisting the ring on her hand. "My brother, Charles, died years ago, in Constantinople. An accident, they said, but there were rumors, political intrigues, betrayals." Vance asked about it, as if he knew something. It was unsettling. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. "Mercy, madame. Your candor is appreciated." As she turned away, he noted the portrait again, its subject's eyes seeming to follow her. A connection, perhaps, to the orchid's history, to Sir Reginald's travels, to the dagger itself. As the morning wore on, the manor's atmosphere grew heavier. The guests retreating to their rooms or pacing the grounds, their alibis and motives swirling in Poirot's mind. The note, the dagger, the disturbed soil, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. He resolved to return to Vance's room, to find the note and uncover its meaning. The truth, he sensed, was indeed blooming, and with it, the identity of a killer who had struck under the moon's unyielding gaze. Chapter 6. The alibi puzzled the morning at Blackthorn Manor unfolded under a sky heavy with clouds. The mist that cloaked the Devon hills, lending an oppressive weight to the air. Within the manor's grand halls, the atmosphere was no lighter. As the spectre of Dr. Lionel Vance's murder hung over the guests like a storm waiting to break, Hercule Poirot, his demeanor as precise as ever, stood in the library. Its shelves of leather-bound tomes a silent audience to his deliberations. The fire crackled faintly, casting flickering shadows across the portrait of Lady Evelyn's brother, Charles, whose stern gaze seemed to follow Poirot's every move. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood nearby, his notebook open, his brow furrowed. With the effort of keeping pace with Poirot's relentless logic, Poirot Hastings said, his voice low, "This business is getting murkier by the hour. A locked conservatory, a dagger from nowhere, and that note about the truth blooming at midnight. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw with half the pieces missing." He glanced at the library's arched windows, where the grey light of morning did little to dispel the gloom. Poirot's moustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a mind at work. A jigsaw, mon ami, is only complete when one understands the picture it forms. We have the pieces, the dagger, the silk, the pollen, the note, but we must place them with care. Today we unravel the alibis, for it is in their contradictions that the truth hides. He paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, his hands clasped behind his back as he reconstructed the fatal moment in the conservatory. Poirot's first task was to establish the precise timeline of the murder, a task that required the meticulous piecing together of each guest's account. He had already noted their positions at midnight, when the lunar seraphica bloomed and Vance was struck down. But alibis were more than positions, they were movements, glances, intentions. He summoned the guests to the drawing room, where the fire had been stoked to ward off the morning's chill. The group assembled reluctantly, their faces drawn, their civility strained by suspicion and sleeplessness. Sir Reginald Ashford stood by the mantel, his silver hair dishevelled, his diplomatic poise fraying at the edges. Lady Evelyn, seated in her backed chair, clutched a shawl around her shoulders, her eyes avoiding the others. Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair pinned with less care than usual, leaned against a window, her cigarette smoke curling in the air. Julian Harrow, his charm subdued, sat with an air of forced calm, while Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her handkerchief a crumpled relic, fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting between Poirot and the door. Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "Madame?" At Messieurs, we return to the moment of the crime. At 11:55 p.m., you were all in the conservatory, gathered for the unveiling of the lunar seraphica. By midnight, Dr. Vance was dead, stabbed with a dagger in a room locked from within. I require each of you to recount your movements from 11:50 p.m. until the scream of Lady Evelyn. Precision, s'il vous plaît, is essential. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly. I was at the pedestal, preparing to speak. I addressed the guests, explaining the orchid's significance. My eyes were on the flower, on the crowd. I saw nothing else until Evelyn's cry. His voice wavered, and Poirot noted the slight hesitation, as if Sir Reginald were choosing his words with care. Lady Evelyn spoke next, her voice soft but steady. I was beside Reginald, to his left. I watched the orchid, waiting for it to bloom. I felt a chill, perhaps a draft, and glanced toward the ferns. That's when I saw him, Dr. Vance, slumped there. Her fingers tightened on her shawl, and Poirot observed the faint tremor, wondering if it was shock or something more calculated. Clara Wentworth exhaled sharply, her tone edged with impatience. I was near the ferns, a few paces from the pedestal. As I said before, I was watching the orchid, everyone was. I didn't notice Vance until the scream. Honestly, Monsieur Poirot, this is pointless. We were all there, staring at that flower. Her words were crisp, almost rehearsed, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Noting the defiance in her posture, Julian Harrow leaned forward, his voice smooth but tinged with unease. I stood by the glass wall, to the right. I had a clear view of the pedestal, the orchid, most of the room. I was caught up in the moment. The bloom was extraordinary. I didn't see Vance until Lady Evelyn screamed. His hands rested lightly on his knees, but Poirot detected a slight tension in his fingers, as if he were holding something back. Beatrice Lyle, her voice trembling, spoke last. I was near the door, as I told you. I was watching the orchid. But I glanced at the others now and then. One does, you know. I heard a rustle, like leaves or fabric, just before the scream, but I couldn't tell where it came from. Her eyes flicked to Clara, then away, and Poirot filed the gesture away as a thread in the web of suspicion. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind him, his mind sifting through the accounts. Bon, we have a picture, but it is blurred. Each of you claims to have been absorbed by the lunar Seraphica, yet a man was stabbed in your midst. The dagger, it did not appear by magic. Someone moved, someone acted in those fleeting moments. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Let us test these alibis. Sir Reginald, you say you were at the pedestal. Did you step away at any point? Sir Reginald's face flushed. No, Monsieur Poirot. I was there, addressing the guests. I couldn't have moved without being noticed. His voice was firm, but his hands trembled, and Poirot noted the beads of sweat on his brow. Madame Evelyn, Poirot continued, turning to her, you speak of a chill, a glance toward the ferns. Did you see anyone near Dr. Vance before the scream? Lady Evelyn hesitated, her eyes flickering to her husband. No, no one. It was just a shadow, perhaps my imagination. The ferns are dense, you see. Her voice was steady, but Poirot sensed an evasion, a reluctance to reveal what she had truly seen. Clara Wentworth, her cigarette burning low, snapped, This is absurd. Are you accusing us all? I was watching the orchid, as I said. I didn't see Vance, and I certainly didn't stab him. Her defiance was bold, but Poirot noted the slight quiver in her hand, the way her eyes darted to the door. Harrow's smile was faint. I saw nothing, Monsieur Poirot. The orchid was mesmerizing. If someone moved, they were quick about it. His tone was smooth, but Poirot detected a guarded quality, as if Harrow were measuring his words against an unseen script. Beatrice Lyle, her handkerchief now a sodden knot, ventured, I did hear that rustle, as I said. It might have been the ferns, or someone's dress. But I couldn't swear to it. Her voice trembled, and Poirot noted her glance toward Clara, a hint of accusation in her eyes. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Merci, your accounts. They form a pattern, but it is incomplete. Let us consider the opportunity. The conservatory was locked, the key with Sir Reginald. The dagger, it was not carried openly. It was hidden, perhaps among the ferns, placed there before the unveiling. The killer, they knew the moment, the distraction of the bloom. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But there is more. The groundskeeper reported a figure in the gardens at 11:30 p.m., shadowy, unidentifiable. Did any of you venture outside before the unveiling? A chorus of denials followed, though Poirot noted Clara's quick glance at Harrow, and Lady Evelyn's tightened grip on her shawl. Sir Reginald spoke, his voice strained. I was in the manor, preparing for the unveiling. I saw no one in the gardens. His words were firm, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Poirot's little grey cells churned. The alibis were consistent, yet too perfect, as if rehearsed. The rustle Beatrice heard, the shadow in the gardens, the disturbed soil around the orchid, these were fragments of a larger truth. He dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain in the manor, and drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami Poirot," said, his voice low, "the alibis. They are like a house of cards, stable until one card is pulled. The killer was among them, moving in the moment of the bloom, using the orchid's allure as a veil. But the dagger, its origin, is the key. We must trace it, and we must find the note in Vance's room." Hastings nodded, his face grim. "That note, the truth blooms at midnight. It's chilling, Poirot. Do you think Vance knew he was in danger?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps Hastings, or perhaps he sought to expose another secret and paid the price. "Come. We go to his room. The truth, it waits for us, hidden in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor." As they left the drawing room, the clouds parted briefly, casting a fleeting ray of sunlight across the manor's facade. Poirot, his mind a whirl of possibilities, felt the puzzle tightening, the alibis forming a web that would soon ensnare a killer. Chapter 7. The orchid's secret. The afternoon light at Blackthorn Manor was muted, filtered through a shroud of clouds that pressed low over the Devon hills, casting the estate in a somber glow. Within the manor's opulent walls, the tension among the guests had thickened, each glance and whispered word heavy with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood in the library, his green eyes fixed on a leather-bound volume of botanical lore he had plucked from the shelves. The book, though informative, was a mere distraction as his little grey cells worked tirelessly, weaving together the threads of Dr. Lionel Vance's murder, the dagger, the silk, the pollen, the cryptic note, and the elusive alibis of the guests. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, paced near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with frustration, "we've got a locked room, a murder weapon from nowhere, and alibis that don't crack. That note, the truth blooms at midnight. It's haunting me. What was Vance onto, and how does that blasted orchid fit into it all?" His honest face reflected the strain of the puzzle, a puzzle that seemed to defy even Poirot's formidable intellect. Poirot closed the book with a soft thud, his mustache twitching as he turned to Hastings. "The orchid, mon ami, is not merely a flower. It is a symbol, a catalyst, drawing out the secrets of those who seek it." The note suggests Vance believed a truth would be revealed at the unveiling, but whose truth? And why did it lead to his death? We must look closer, not only at the conservatory, but at the Luna Seraphica itself. His eyes gleamed with purpose, and he gestured for Hastings to follow. "Come." We return to Vance's room. The note awaits, and perhaps more. The guest wing was silent, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and wax. Vance's room, untouched since Elsie's discovery of the note, was a study in scholarly chaos, books on botany stacked precariously, papers strewn across a desk, and a microscope perched beside a vial of soil. Poirot's gaze fell on the blotter where Elsie had described finding the note. Lifting it carefully, he uncovered a single sheet of stationery, its black ink scrawled with the words, "The truth blooms at midnight." The handwriting was unmistakably Vance's, hurried and uneven, as if written under duress. Poirot held it to the light, noting a faint watermark, a crest matching that of Blackthorn Manor, suggesting Vance had used Sir Reginald's own paper. Curious. Poirot murmured, slipping the note into an envelope. This was no idle scribble. Vance meant it to be found, perhaps as a warning or a challenge, but to whom? He searched the desk further, finding a folded letter tucked inside a botanical journal. It was a telegram, dated 2 days prior, from a Dr. Percival Gray, a botanist. In London, the message was brief. Confirm Luna seraphica's stem may conceal documents. Exercise caution. Grey Poirot's pulse quickened. The orchid, it seemed, was more than a marvel. It was a vessel for secrets. Leaving the room, Poirot dispatched a telegram to Dr. Gray, requesting urgent details about the Luna seraphica's properties. He then led Hastings back to the conservatory, where the glass dome gleamed dully under the overcast sky. The Luna seraphica stood on its pedestal, its petals closed, its presence both serene and sinister. Poirot approached it with reverence, his gloved hands tracing the pot's rim. "Hastings," he said, "the legends of this flower speak of hidden truths. If Dr. Gray is correct, its stem may hold more than sap." With delicate precision, Poirot tilted the pot, revealing the faint scratch he had noted earlier. He produced a small knife, its blade gleaming, and carefully sliced into the orchid's thick stem, just above the soil. The flesh parted, revealing a hollow cavity within. Nested inside was a tightly rolled parchment, yellowed with age, its edges sealed. With wax, Poirot extracted it with care, his eyes alight with triumph. "Voila," he said softly, "the orchid's secret." Unrolling the parchment, Poirot found a document written in a dense, coded script. Its characters unfamiliar, perhaps a cipher from Sir Reginald's diplomatic past. The wax seal bore a crest, not unlike the one on the manor's stationery, but with a subtle variation, a thorn pierced by a dagger. Poirot's little grey cells raced. This, Hastings, is no mere botanical curiosity. It is a relic of intrigue, perhaps tied to Sir Reginald's travels, or to Lady Evelyn's brother. Vance, I suspect, discovered it, and it cost him his life. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. A coded document. Good Lord. Poirot, this is like something out of a spy novel. Do you think it's connected to the dagger? Poirot nodded, his expression grave. The dagger, the document, the note, they are threads in a single tapestry. The killer sought to silence Vance before he could reveal this secret, or perhaps to claim it for themselves. He pocketed the parchment, resolving to decipher it later, and turned his attention to the conservatory's layout, re-examining the clues he had found, the scrap of silk, the footprints, the pollen. Each pointed to a calculated act committed. In the fleeting moment of the orchid's bloom, returning to the manor, Poirot sought out Sir Reginald, finding him in his study, surrounded by maps and artifacts from his diplomatic accountant's diplomatic career. The diplomat's face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, rising, "have you news?" Poirot produced the parchment, watching Sir Reginald's reaction. This was found within the Luna seraphica's stem, a coded document, perhaps of great significance. "Do you know of it?" Sir Reginald paled, his hands shaking as he took the parchment. This is impossible. It resembles documents I handled in Constantinople years ago, diplomatic secrets, coded for security. But how did it? He broke off, his face a mask of shock. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Dr. Vance, it seems, discovered it, and someone ensured he would not reveal it. "Speak, Sir Reginald. What is this document?" Sir Reginald sank into a chair, his voice hoarse. "It may be a record of certain transactions. My work involved sensitive negotiations, some of which were not entirely above board. But I swear, I didn't know it was in the orchid. I acquired the flower through a contact in Siam, nothing more. Poirot noted the diplomat's distress, sensing truth mingled with evasion. He turned to Lady Evelyn, who had entered silently, her face pale. "Madame, your brother, Charles, served in Constantinople. Was he connected to such documents?" Lady Evelyn's lips parted, her eyes fixed on the parchment. "Charles, he was involved in delicate matters. He died there, an accident, they said. But there were rumors of betrayal, of secrets sold. Vance asked me about it, as if he knew. Something," her voice trembled, and Poirot saw fear in her eyes. Fear of a past unearthed. Poirot's mind churned. The document, the dagger, Lady Evelyn's brother, they formed a nexus of motive. Vance, it seemed, had uncovered a scandal tied to the Ashford family, perhaps involving smuggling or espionage. The killer had acted to protect that secret, striking in the conservatory's locked embrace as Poirot and Hastings left the study. The detective's thoughts were a whirlwind. "Hastings," he said, "the orchid's secret is a key, but it unlocks a door to the past. We must decipher this code and trace the dagger's origin. The truth, it is close, but it is guarded by lies." Hastings nodded, his face grim. "A dangerous game, Poirot. If that document's as serious as it sounds, someone was desperate to keep it hidden." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Desperate, yes, and bold. But Hercule Poirot, he is bolder still. Come, we have work to do before the moon rises again." The manor's corridors seemed to close in around them, the weight of secrets pressing from every shadow. The Luna Seraphica's hidden document had revealed a glimpse of the truth, but Poirot knew the final piece of the puzzle lay in the hearts of those who stood in the moonlight, one of whom had killed to keep the past buried. Chapter 8. The Moonlit Confession. The moon hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its silver light spilling through the tall windows of the drawing room, casting long, wavering shadows across the polished floor. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. The guests gathered in a tense tableau, their faces etched with dread and anticipation. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, impeccable figure radiating a quiet authority that commanded silence. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to glowing embers, its faint crackle the only sound as the group awaited Poirot's summation of the grim mystery that had unfolded in the conservatory. Captain Hastings, seated near the door, gripped his notebook, his honest face a mixture of awe and unease. "Poirot," he whispered, leaning close, "you've got that look, the one that means you've cracked it. But how? The locked room, the dagger, that coded document. It's all a tangle." His voice was low, but his eyes betrayed his confidence in Poirot's genius. Poirot's moustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of a mind that had pieced together the puzzle's final fragments. "Mon ami," he said softly, "the tangle, it is but an illusion. With method and order, the threads align, and the truth, it shines like the moon itself. Observe, and you shall see." He turned to the guests, his voice rising with calm precision. "Mesdames et messieurs, we gather tonight to unveil not a flower, but a killer. The murder of Dr. Lionel Vance, committed in the locked conservatory, is no longer a mystery. Hercule Poirot has seen what lies beneath the shadows." The guests stirred, their postures stiffening. Sir Reginald Ashford, standing by the mantel, gripped its edge, his silver hair catching the moonlight. Lady Evelyn, seated with her hands folded tightly, stared at Poirot with a mixture of fear and resignation. Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair loose, stood near a window, her cigarette unlit, her eyes defiant. Julian Harrow, his charm eroded by fatigue, leaned against a bookcase, his face pale. Mrs. Beatrice Lyle, her handkerchief a crumpled relic, sat with wide eyes, her breath quickening as Poirot began. "Let us begin with the facts," Poirot said, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. At midnight, the Luna Seraphica bloomed in the conservatory, a spectacle that drew all eyes. In that moment, Dr. Vance was stabbed with a jeweled dagger in a room locked with a key held by Sir Reginald. No one entered, no one left, yet a man died. The impossible, it seems, has occurred. But the impossible, it is merely the possible. Disguised by misdirection, he paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The clues, they speak clearly. A scrap of silk, pale blue, caught on a thorn among the ferns. Footprints in the soil, suggesting a struggle. A smear of pollen on Von sleeve, matching that on the orchid's pedestal. A coded document, hidden in the Luna Seraphica's stem, revealing a smuggling ring tied to diplomatic circles. And a note in Vance's room. "The truth blooms at midnight. These are the threads, and they weave a tale of betrayal, sir." Reginald cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, this document, I swear, I knew nothing of it. My collection, my travels, they are no secret, but smuggling. I am no criminal." His hands trembled, and Poirot noted the desperation. In his eyes, Lady Evelyn spoke, her voice low. "If there was a secret, it died with my brother, Charles, in Constantinople." Vance's questions stirred painful memories, nothing more. Her fingers twisted her ring. A nervous gesture Poirot had observed before. Clara Wentworth's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. You think one of us hid a document in a flower, killed Vance over it. It's madness." Her defiance was bold, but her eyes flickered to the door, betraying unease. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Patience. Mademoiselle, let us unravel the method." The conservatory was locked. The key was Sir Reginald. The dagger, with its emerald-encrusted handle, was no stranger to this house. "It is a relic from your travels, Sir Reginald. A gift from a Persian envoy, kept in a locked case in your study." Sir Reginald's face paled, but he nodded, confirming Poirot's deduction. "The killer," Poirot continued, "did not bring the dagger to the conservatory that night. It was hidden earlier, among the ferns, where the scrap of silk was found. The footprints show a struggle, but brief. Vance faced his killer, perhaps lured to the ferns, under a pretense. The pollen on his sleeve suggests he brushed against the orchid's pedestal, perhaps in his final moments. The locked door. It was never a barrier, for the killer was already inside, one of you." Beatrice Lyle gasped, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. "But who, Monsieur Poirot? We were all watching the orchid." Her voice trembled, and Poirot noted her glance toward Clara, a hint of suspicion. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The orchid. It was the perfect distraction. All eyes were on its petals, allowing the killer to move swiftly. But the silk, it betrays the truth. It is from a shawl, pale blue, worn by Miss Clara Wentworth earlier that day, seen by the groundskeeper in the garden during her argument with Vance. Clara's face froze, her cigarette falling to the floor. "That's nonsense," Clara snapped, her voice sharp but unsteady. "I wasn't wearing a shawl last night. You're grasping at straws, Monsieur Poirot. Her hands clenched, and Poirot observed the faint tremor, the crack in her composure. Poirot continued, undeterred. The document in the orchid stem, it speaks of a smuggling ring, one that involved Lady Evelyn's brother, Charles, in Constantinople. Vance, with his relentless curiosity, uncovered it. He confronted you, Mademoiselle Wentworth, in the garden, threatening to expose your role in funding the ring with your inheritance. The note, "The truth blooms at midnight," was his warning, his belief that the unveiling would reveal your secret. Clara's eyes widened, her defiance crumbling. This is preposterous. I had no part in any smuggling. Vance was a nuisance, nothing more. But her voice faltered, and Poirot pressed forward, his tone relentless. You lured Vance to the ferns, under pretense of a truce. You had hidden the dagger there earlier, taken from Sir Reginald's study. As the orchid bloomed, you struck, knowing all eyes were elsewhere. The silk from your shawl, torn in the struggle, betrayed you. Your alibi, so precise, was rehearsed, but it could not hide the truth. Clara staggered back, her face ashen. No, no, you're wrong. But her voice broke, and she sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. The room was silent. The guests frozen, their eyes on Clara as her defiance dissolved into sobs. Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze remained piercing. You killed Dr. Vance to protect your legacy, mademoiselle, to keep your family's name untarnished by the scandal of smuggling. But the truth, it always blooms. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his face a mask of shock. Clara, is this true? His voice was barely a whisper, and Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Clara's sobs grew louder, and she nodded, her voice choked. He would have ruined me. My family's fortune, it was tied to those deals. I couldn't let him destroy us. I didn't mean, I only wanted to stop him. Her confession hung in the air, a stark admission under the moon's unyielding gaze. Poirot signaled to Hastings, who moved to the door, summoning the constable waiting outside. As Clara was led away, her head bowed, the room remained silent, the weight of her betrayal settling over the guests. Poirot turned to the window, gazing at the conservatory's distant dome, its glass glinting in the moonlight. Hastings approached, his voice low. You did it, Poirot. Solved the impossible. But what a tragedy, greed and secrets, tearing lives apart. His face was grim, but his eyes held admiration for his friend. Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression somber. The human heart? Mon ami is the greatest puzzle of all. It seeks beauty, but too often finds betrayal. The Luna Seraphica has bloomed, and with it, the truth. He turned from the window, his little grey cells at rest, the mystery of Blackthorn Manor resolved. Under the moonlit night, the end.